as programs start with the commercials, so here are some commercials.
We would like you to read carefully through the sheaf of literature that we've given to you with the video that you've just been watching. This will give you the individual details about the different resources and courses that we produce at our centre up in Cumbria. But so that you can have a bit more information about them, let me just show you some of the resources, all of which have developed out of our own evangelism. Those leaflets, Now Believe Now, Now Grow Now, Now Share Now, we have written them trying to keep to the rules that we've been spelling out during the sessions through this video, in that we have not used any term that we haven't defined carefully first for the non-Christian person. And we've tried to explain everything with that person in mind. Now, when you look them through, if you think that we've kept to those rules and succeeded in what we set out to do, then perhaps you'll be able to make use of them in your evangelism. The Evangelism Cookbook starts off with the story of how we came to be in Cumbria, and then goes on to work out some of the details of the events that we will have covered in this video. For the overhead projector, because we are so convinced that adults, it's not just only the children who remember more when they see visual impact. Adults too will remember more if they see a visual impression. So as part of that, we have developed a range of visuals for making a better use of the overhead projector. All of our headlines and borders are printed on the back so that you can put your own information onto the front and clean it off and use it over and over again for different messages or texts or songs. The parables are available, including the parable that Derek used in session 1 of the two sons. And badges as a constant help and aid to people who find it difficult to start conversations with other people. Witness badges to help you get started in some real conversations. But if you would like to join us in Cumbria, we do a range of courses whereby what we could do if we had a small group of you staying with us is to actually apply some of our ideas to your town and your situation and discuss with you some of the ideas that you want to do. We do the different courses, ideas for evangelism generally, not just for men. Discover your spiritual gifts. 1 in 10 of the people in your church should be an evangelist. So how do you find out which ones they are? And how do you release them to do the job of evangelism? And what do the rest of you do in order to help them get on with the job? So although it's looking at spiritual gifts, it's with the idea of evangelism. Leadership skills too. Not every minister is the evangelist. Now he needs to guide the church, and all the leadership need to guide the church so that evangelism is high on your church's agenda. And then of course the reaching men is applying what we've talked about on this video to your church and your situation. But maybe you just are thinking of planning your holidays, and we live in a lovely part of the country. People who've been to our training courses have said to us, what do you do when you're not doing a training course? You can't keep this lovely place to yourself. And so over the years, we have gradually opened it up more and more for people to come on holidays. Just passing through, bed and breakfast. We do, Jenny upstairs does a lovely evening meal. And we've also found requests from single people who can't really go on holiday in the general way of things, or perhaps they've got a few days to spare, and they want to do some reading, not a lot, but then if they tell us their subject, we have a wide library, and we would tell you which is the main chapter to read, the best chapter, and give you as much or as little of the reading that you would like to do. So we would like to see you. But then as an alternative, we are very happy to come to you. Derek is an evangelist, And over the years, we have seen that his evangelism has constantly seen a good response from men, both when he was a minister in the church and when he's gone as the visiting evangelist to different churches. Our normal pattern is to go through 2 weekends, from one Sunday to the next Sunday, and doing a lot of the events that we're going to talk about in this next session 5, doing them with a church, with the hope that that will become an integral part of their program over the months and years ahead. So if you can't come and see us, then we would like to come and see you, and thank you for watching this video.
We've actually given you 2 extra sheets of paper. One is an assessment form, and maybe before you leave you would like to fill in that assessment form and get it back to us. The first time I was ever asked to give out a form that was going to do an assessment of some of my teaching, people had to twist my arm very hard before I was prepared to give it out. But we have in fact found that this sort of assessment has enabled us to improve all that we are presenting in the different sessions, and particularly the man facts on the back. There's opportunity for any other topics or any other comments, and before you leave we'd appreciate your help with that. Maybe in our churches we ought to be doing a little more assessment of things, checking up whether people are hearing clearly and being prepared to take the risk of letting them say the comments that they feel are relevant. But I want to take our time now to look at the 101 ideas, and there is no way in which I can cover all 101 of them in the next 35 minutes or so. I want to pick out some from each section. If I don't happen to pick on one that has already interested you, then do get in touch and I'll try and give you the full details on that particular headline. But let's start in section A, and the concept of advertising the men that you already have, giving a high profile for the men that you have. Here's a Church of England up in the North Country, a vicar who didn't have all that many men attending his church, but he did give all his men jobs to do. Now, he wasn't against the ladies, he wasn't against women having any participation in the ministry, but he, for the last couple of years, has used men in every situation. In other words, it's a man who greets you at the door. It's a man who gives you the book. The men who take up the offerings. They use an overhead projector in their teaching. It's a man who wheels the overhead projector into place. It's a man who puts the screen up. It's a man who takes the screen down. And the impact given is that this church has a lot of men. In actual fact, the few men it's got are all doing something. But at the end of 2 years, that Anglican vicar is saying that more men are being attracted because he's given out the message, the impression has been given, that men attend his church. Now, you may or may not agree with him, but it has worked, giving high profile to the men in his church. How about advertising the men who do attend? Here's a church in Manchester. And now you will get in your district one of the free newspapers. Maybe you're in a district that gets half a dozen free newspapers, and you don't have any time to read them, of course, because you're too busy going to all the church meetings and being sort of religious and Christian and good. But people do read the free newspapers. That's why they're produced, that's why they sell. And here's a church in Manchester. They went along to the free newspaper and they said, we want the front page right-hand corner, prime sort of position, or the back page left-hand corner. They wanted a 2-column, 5-6 centimetre spot. They negotiated a 10% discount because it was a religious charity that the newspaper was selling to. Always worth asking, push them as far as you can. And they put into their little advert the picture of one of the men who came to their church. And then, in that size of advert, you've got room for about 45, 50 words. So the little script said, Joe Blogg comes along to the XYZ church because, and then a quote from Joe Blogg. On the Sunday, following that newspaper having been delivered around the district as the free newspaper, they made sure that Joe Blogg was in the vestibule to welcome people, or that Joe Blogg was reading the lesson in church, or giving his testimony, that he was involved in the service in some way. And they argue that that's the best advertising they've ever done. They've chosen, of course, their men. Even when they've been family men, they've just put a photograph of the man in. They're just balancing it up. The fact that we've done 5 times as much for the ladies in the past years, they're just balancing it up a bit in that way. One man who had his photograph in the local paper was in fact one of the local butchers. And people were going into the shop all on the Friday morning after the newspaper had been delivered on Thursday saying, "You're famous." I said, "Why am I famous?" "Your picture's in the paper." And some of them came on the Sunday to hear a bit of his story, because he told them, "I'll be telling my story on Sunday." So give, profile and advertise the men that you have. In that respect, number 7 there talks about appointing a media rep. Will you make sure that your church or fellowship has someone who's feeding information into the churches, into the church column of the newspaper or into the local newspaper? I know they get things wrong. I know they spell your name wrong. I know they put the wrong street for your church building. I know they print it upside down, but you persist. These poor people in these local newspapers, they have to fill a newspaper every week. They're desperate for news. You keep feeding them with news. If you notice that your local newspaper, like mine, goes for articles of about 150 words length, then you write your news in 150-word chunks. And then the editor won't have to waste time sort of cutting it out. I've got it down to a fine art now so that he virtually prints word for word everything that I send in, because he knows it's going to be the right sort of length for his particular newspaper. How about number 10 down on that list in section A? Telephone evangelism to men. We've done this in some areas. Simply going down the telephone book and finding where it was definitely a man who lived at that house, we've phoned the number. We've had a little script. We've worked out beforehand a little 2-minute talk, what we were going to tell him about Christianity and what we were going to tell him about our fellowship. And we've given our little 2-minute talk. You know, we've never had a bad reaction to that. Cold calling by the telephone to men. We've never actually had a man slam the receiver down and say, "Don't you dare call me again." We did have a funny reaction once when we'd telephoned the Jewish rabbi by mistake. We went through our little spiel. You know what he said? He said, "God bless you." That's what he said at the end. We've never had a bad reaction. How about number 16 down on that list? Where do these young men take their jeans off and push them in the washing machine? It's in the local laundrette. Or what about that pile in the local dentists or doctors or the hairdressers, the men's hairdressers? Why don't you get some of your material? Challenge newspaper maybe, or some other Christian reading material. Update it. Go and take the old stuff away and put something new in. If you don't witness to anyone else, you'll witness to the doctor's receptionist month after month as she sees you doing that sort of work. Church award for player of the match at the local football club. I don't know how many attend the sort of ground at your local football club. What would it be now? Woking would get, I'm not sure what they get nowadays, a couple of hundred to a match? Is that right? Something like that. Well, advertising in that sort of area, player of the match. It might only cost you £10. It's given out over the tannoy system. There are 200 men and their sons who are watching the match. And it's given out over the tannoy system. The Player of the Match award this afternoon was given to Peter Rees of the Woking team. The award was made by the XYZ Baptist Church. And 200 men say, "Baptist Church? What on earth is that doing? Advertising." You've given the impression that you're interested in men. And number 21 in section A there, getting the men that you have to share their stories. Lillian mentioned earlier on in one of the sessions about we often don't know how people have come to faith. And we ought to know so that we can use them as illustrations, if nothing else. We can pray for them more effectively. Why not, week by week, a man giving his story? Now, some of the men in your fellowship are shy. They're not used to standing up in front of a microphone and talking. Okay, do it as an interview. In fact, if you watch the box, very few things are straight to camera. Most of them are interviews. And you get someone in your fellowship who asks the right questions. Get them on a training course watching Wogan and Sue Lawley and one or two others for a while. They'll soon know how to get even the shyest of men. He won't be talking to the audience. He'll be talking just to you. and you'll find the most amazing stories coming out and the most powerful witness and testimonies. So advertise the men that you have. There's a whole section of ideas, and if you have some brainstorming, you'll be able to produce another 21 at least in that sort of category. Let me move to section B and talk again on this topic of prayer and men. We've emphasized it, and we want to end this session again with a period for prayer so that we can pray together about some of our friends and colleagues. If you were involved in Mission England or one of those projects, you would have set up prayer triplets probably in your church. Why not renew that idea? Maybe it's faded out. Why not renew it for the new year and get 3 men together as a prayer triplet? Maybe 3 men who travel together in the same car to work, 3 Christians. Or 3 men who can get together for breakfast on a Saturday morning. 3 men, and each of them brings the name of 3 more. So they pray for each other, and they pray for another 9. We've seen the most thrilling things happen when men have concentrated their prayers on men. It's not a new idea, of course, concentrating your prayers. Years ago when I worked with Charlie Potter, it was one of the things that he'd done in the secular realm as a communist, targeting people, and so he applied it to his newfound Christian faith. And he used to come in, there were 5 of us, 5 men in this particular factory. And he said, right, now tell me, who do you know in this workplace who's already interested in Christian things? Someone who's asking questions about Christianity. Oh, immediately everyone said, it's Peter. Peter's been asking all sorts of questions. Right, he said. And he produced some postcards from his pocket. He said, we'll write his name down. And so we wrote the name, Peter Baines. And all 5 of us carried the postcard around. Every time we pulled our wallet out, we pulled this postcard out that said Peter Baines, and we remembered to pray. I don't know how good at praying you are. I tend to need a lot of reminders, and the postcard reminded me. 6 weeks later, Peter got converted. Marvelous. So we got him in on it. 6 of us now. So we get together, and we think about another person who's showing some interest in Christianity. And we put his name down on the postcards and we prayed for him. That almost finished us off. It was about 8 months before he became a Christian. And we almost faded away and gave up. Though 8 months isn't all that long, really, in eternity. But we concentrated our prayers on that next man. He became a Christian 8 months later. Went to a film in town, Christian film, got gloriously converted. So we got him in on it. 7 of us now, so we get a new set of postcards. And we look for a new name to put down. There was one man in our workplace. He wasn't actually a Communist Party member, but he was certainly a fellow traveller. And he came along to one of the Christians one day and he said, hey, you won't put my name on those postcards, will you? He said. It got through, that people got prayed for and things happened to them. How about participation in the services, the men that you have got, even if it's leading prayers? Or if soaps are the thing that everyone is watching on all the channels, why not a Christian soap written in your church? The ongoing saga of a Christian father. Gentleman here on the front row has got the idea straight away. He knows who the producer's going to be. 3-minute item. I tell you, they'll be coming for the soap, not the sermon, after the first month or so. The ongoing saga of a Christian father, bringing up the children, coping with the wife, paying the mortgage, repairing the car. Goodness me, it has enormous potential as an ongoing thing in your church. If you can, I've turned the page to 28, if you can get hold of information, and sometimes you can, from either estate agents or removal companies, so that you can discover who's moved into your area, then aim an information pack at those new people within those first days. It's one of the opportunities. A movement time is an opportunity when someone who maybe was a churchgoer falls away, or it's an opportune time when someone who wasn't a churchgoer but was wondering about going, you give him a chance to come to your place. He couldn't go back in his old estate because everyone knew he washed the car on Sunday morning. But now he's got a new start and a new home, and if you're in there with the information, that might just be the bridge to help him through. Prayerfully use the newspaper headlines. Number 32, I already referred to the Sun that talked about commies check out, but there's a secondary headline there. Let me read it to you. It's a quote from Alexander Dubček's speech. For far too long we have lived in darkness. Let us begin taking action in the light. Now there's a marvelous headline. What if you were one of my neighbours and I gave you that and said, what do you think of that then? And he'll tell you something about Czechoslovakia, he'll tell you something about communism, he'll tell you something about Dubček. And then he'll say, what do you think? I mean, that's always, for any man will do that to you. If you ask his opinion, he'll ask your opinion. I'll tell you my opinion. I think we've all lived too long in the darkness. I think it's time to begin taking action in the light. That's why I've let God change my life. And I'm seeking to walk in the light of God's power and God's love. Use the headlines. If you watch the local papers or the national papers, you'll find that probably once a month on average, there's a headline that you can use to present the Christian message. Prayerfully use the headlines in the newspapers. Use the Dobson film, How to Be a Good Father. If you've not already, well, you probably have already used that series, but it's worth repeating, particularly the one on fatherhood. Just for men, an evening just for the men. Show them the film where Dobson talks about how to be a good father. A doctor to talk on stress, that's number 34 on this list. There are, in management terms, one of the current issues is the question of stress for managers. And many people on the estates where we live are feeling this kind of pressure. Well, how about getting a Christian doctor to talk about stress? We have a lot of answers to the issue of stress. Isn't it, doesn't the Bible say about casting all your stress on him? Because he knows all about stress and he cares for you. Is that a free translation of what Peter wrote somewhere? Well, make that an issue to attract men and to talk about an issue that really troubles them and concerns them. Moving on to section C, how others have done it. In your manual there is a page about career. I'm not suggesting you look at that now. Read it when you get home or read it at another occasion. But some of the leaders in Korea, you know how the church in Korea, South Korea, has grown enormously. It's roughly 1 in 3 in South Korea who are Christian believers. If we'd got that sort of thing, just think about that. 1 in 3 taxi drivers, Christians. 1 in 3 bus drivers, Christians. 1 in 3 shopkeepers, Christians. 1 in 3 insurance salesmen, Christians. I mean, it would be a marvelous world to live in if it was 1 in 3. We'd relax, wouldn't we? The South Koreans are saying, let's pray for 2 out of 3. That's their kind of moving on. But some of their leaders were asked, how did you get this kind of impact? And they named these 3 issues. They named prayer as the key. They get up for early morning prayer meetings before they go to work. They don't have Christian conventions with musicians and speakers. They have Christian prayer weeks when everyone comes together and just prays in groups or in big meetings. Prayer as an essential. Then the second one, fasting, they said was the second key. Because there isn't enough time for prayer. The only way to get more time for prayer is to give up a meal now and again and use the time that you would have been eating to pray. So that's what the Koreans hit on. Prayer and fasting. But then their third conclusion surprised me even more. The issue of tithing. They said what we did was when the first group of people became believers, we taught them to set aside 1/10 of their income for the work of God. We then had the money, they said, to launch a bigger project. And out of that bigger project, more people became Christians. And they were taught to give to the Lord's work. And out of that came all the resources to put on this program and that program. Interesting key to expansion and growth. Concentrating on the successful things, number 36. If you've got something that has been a success in reaching men, why not do it again? I went to an evangelistic dinner for men. There were 80 men there. They told me that 32 or 33 of them were non-Christian men. I thought that was tremendous. I said, when are you going to do the next one? They said, oh, well, we might do one in a year's time. A year's time? What commercial company that had got a thing that was winning would put it off for another year? I'm not suggesting you do another one next week, but you can obviously repeat some things. If they're succeeding, push them home. Do them again. You'll do them better the second time round anyway. Let me move on because of time. Father and son, I think, was mentioned in our feedback. The idea of quiz or indoor bowls, the sort of competition element, one father and son against another father and son. Christian sportsman, number 47. I mean, this building, I daren't suggest it to the leaders, but if you cleared all these sort of seats out of the way, you would have a nice area here for a demonstration by a Christian footballer. And you could do some dribbling skills and show you sort of various things on this nice sort of carpeted floor. You don't have to get Glenn Hoddle. In fact, Glenn Hoddle is a bit difficult to get, other than on video. But I've known people who've put that on, and the person who's come has been one of the semi-professionals from the local team. But he's still been better than any of the other men there, and he's still been able to demonstrate some skills and talk a bit about his Christian faith. So you think of using Christian sportsmen. Agnostics Anonymous was also mentioned, the self-discovery group. You're giving men a bridge in, a way in. Church of England vicar invited us to do some meetings in his parish, and he appointed a committee to organise the meetings, and his rule for the committee was that you hadn't to have been a Christian for more than 3 years. You had to be a new Christian, because he reckoned that the new Christians were more in touch with the outsiders. And so he appointed this committee. Actually, it turned him grey overnight, because they came up with ideas that made his hair sort of stand on end. And when they thought of a meeting for men, they used the function room of the local pub. I mean, they never thought twice about it. They never asked the vicar's permission. They just advertised it. They didn't sort of say, will this cause problems with some who feel that drink is a bad thing? They said, where do the men go? They go to the pub. So we'll use the upstairs function room. We'll have a hot pot supper. Derek can bring his musician. The musician can sing. Derek can talk. And the men can listen. And men came who'd actually come to the pub that night, but heard there was something on upstairs and got themselves an invite. As far as I know, only one man became a Christian. He was one of the assistant barmen downstairs. And he'd heard my musician singing, and he heard something of my talking from the bottom of the stairs. And at the end of the evening, I'd offered a booklet on becoming a Christian. And as I'm leaving, this barman said, you know that green booklet you talked about, becoming a Christian, now believe? I said, yes. He said, can I have one? And I thought, here's the professional speaker, you see, the professional evangelist. I thought, oh, he's a collector of booklets, you know. I don't like these people who collect booklets. But I gave him one. And I heard a month later he'd got converted. He'd been listening, and he'd heard the message, and he'd understood. So using places like that. Use your home for evangelism. 53 is in the cookbook, so you can get full details on that. Don't invite too many non-Christians, or you'll have a non-Christian environment. And a meal with a meaning. The key, if you're doing a meal with a meaning for couples, invite the husband to bring his wife. She's the Christian, he isn't. But don't invite the wife to try and drag her husband along. Take your invite, send your invite to the husband. Ask if he'll be your guest and bring his wife to your supper. And time again, that simple courtesy has given the opportunity for the man to save face and come along. He's wanted to hear. You've given them the opportunity to come and hear. Lots more ideas there, and maybe some of you, when our session does finally end, will want to ask questions about that. Section D, videoing the testimonies of 3 men. You've seen the interest that making a video can produce, and the problems it can produce. But how about 3 men out of your church? Here's how to do it. You look down the yellow pages in your area to find the photographers who video weddings. Right? There are always some. In fact, it's the in thing now to have your wedding videoed, and the prices can be quite reasonable. £80, £75, £80 often for the video production, for a simple video production. You go along to one of these men and you say, here's an opportunity for you. We want you to make a video of the story of 3 men who attend our church. You can do a bit of action shots if you like, a man walking to his home or to his work. Maybe we'll come down the church path and the doors can open, you can pan in and into the church. If incidentally you go to a church that seats 400 but only 100 attend, put all the 100 in one corner and pan your camera around the 100 people. It'll look packed out. That's what the BBC do, so you can do it as well as your sort of video. Get the men to rehearse their stories, get them sort of practice a little, and ask the non-Christian man, the professional photographer, to do the video work. He can put his credits on the end. This video was made by the XYZ company, who do wedding videos and photography. And that gets him a commercial mention every time the video is shown. In return, he does it for the cost of the tape. He does it for £10. If he says, not interested, you'd simply go to the next one in the yellow pages. You'll find by number 3 at least, you've got a taker. A man who's prepared to make the video of your church, of some of the men in your church. Then you're in trouble, you see. You've made this video program, but you haven't got a video playback machine. Some of the others, Christians are the least sort of affluent in terms of video playback machines. So you've got this tape and you don't know what to do with it. You'll have to go to your next door neighbour who has got a video playback machine. And you'll have to say to him, our church has made this marvellous tape, but I can't watch it. Can I come and watch it on your set? And he'll say, yes. Hang on, he'll say, my brother-in-law's coming round in 10 minutes. We'll wait till he comes and then we'll all watch it together. And you'll find that you're doing some outreach. We saw a man converted the other year who claimed that he'd attended the church before, and we knew he hadn't. What had happened was he'd watched a video about the church, and he really felt he'd been inside because he'd been in the video. Video the testimonies of some of the men. I mentioned early on the time to explain things to a husband when a wife gets converted is early on. Immediately that happens. There it is on 59. 58 is one thing that a number of churches have seen blessing with. They've concentrated their prayers on one of the non-Christian husbands. They've looked round the Christian wives and the non-Christian husbands that are attached to the church. They've concentrated their prayers on the one man they know to be nearest the kingdom. And then when he's got converted, they've let him be the person who goes around these other non-Christian husbands to tell them what he's discovered. Because he's sat where these other husbands have sat. She saw it first, and I didn't. I heard one man say, with her, he said it came about 2 years ago, it came crash, bang, wallop. She suddenly got converted. He said, with me, it's taken 2 years, but it sort of crept up and tapped me on the shoulder. Now, he doesn't use all the right religious words, but he's a marvellous witness to these other non-Christian husbands. And one church in Essex has seen no less than 4 unconverted husbands won since the first one was won. They concentrated their prayers and they set him free, even though the vicar felt he ought to be retrained for 4 years, treated like a sort of prisoner of war before they let him loose to talk to anyone else. But if they'd done that, of course, all these other opportunities would have gone. How about number 63? Do you get calendars from some of your local print firms? Why doesn't the church print its calendar with pictures of some of the men who attend alongside the sort of dates and send it in to all the local workplaces? Everyone needs calendars. It'll get up in some office or other. Hey, what's this? Here's another man who's one of these Christians. What's happening at this church? All the men in the church, 66, swap one church activity for one secular activity. If you're interested in tennis, you join the tennis club. If you're interested in chess, you join the chess club, and so on. I suggest that you join in threes for this simple reason, that if you go as an individual, the old devil will pick you off. He'll have his snipers up on the rooftop, he'll pick you off. If even 2 of you join, on many of the club nights, one of you will have to go to parent teachers, or someone in the family will be ill, or there'll be other important things, and only one will be turning up. If you do it as a trio, then you'll usually find that at the club events, 2 of you are there. I know of one church that's doing all its outreach this way. It's sending its people out in threes into all the secular clubs. It's not trying to compete with the secular clubs, it's sending its men out to infiltrate them, and they're already getting people saying, hey, don't you go to that church that meets in the school down the road? Can we come? And the bridges are being built. Working Men's Club, 72. Or opportunities where singing is allowed. Christmas time, of course, is the marvellous opportunity to go around and sing some carols. You're not collecting money. Make sure that there's no mistake about that. You're not in there to collect any money. If they do collect money without you realising it, you make sure that you make a big song and dance about it and put it in their charity box. They'll have a charity box in the pub or in the club, so make sure you've not taken any of their money. But don't take the church choir, if you have one, because people might laugh at that. Don't take the young people. They might whistle at that. Take the men. Oh, you say, we've only got 6 men. Okay, that's enough. Male voice choir of 6. Oh, you say, but 5 of them can't sing. Okay, go late on in the evening, they won't know the difference. You get together. In fact, you might have the most marvellous sort of male voice quartet, a barbershop quartet. But I tell you, we've gone into places, 8 or 10 men. What's the impression we've given? We've given the impression that our church has men and that the message is a message for men. So there's an opportunity in going out, particularly at Christmas time. 73, I'm sure some of you have done a survey of religious views, maybe on the shopping precinct in that way. But if you've done a survey, why don't you do a survey just of men's views, right? You go down the street, you knock on the door, cold canvassing it's called, you knock on the door, excuse me, we're doing this religious survey of views. Thank you. We're doing this religious survey, and we'd like to ask for people's opinion. And you can say, we just want the men's opinion, right? So if it's the lady who answers the door, you say, we just want your husband's opinion. If he's not in, okay, thank you very much, you go next door. You get less surveys filled in, but every one is a man's opinion. What have you said? You've said, we're interested in men. God is interested in men. You're balancing up this fact that we've done so much in the past for the ladies and not enough for the men. So that's the end of section D, or all that I can give time to at this present time. Let's move on to section E. What do you think of this? Changing the church times, number 80. Oh, there are sighs of relief, or were they groans of despair? Here's a church, Cheadle Hume area. Two churches, in fact, and they're linked together. One is bigger, and one had about 10 old ladies going along. They got a new, bright young minister, and he said he wanted to preach in both churches every Sunday morning in order to give continuity of ministry. But he couldn't, in fact, be in both places at once because their times overlapped a bit. So he asked the little church with the old ladies if they wouldn't mind having a 9 o'clock Sunday morning service. And because he was a nice young man, and because he'd just arrived and they wanted to please him, and because it fitted in anyway, these older people were up at 9, they were up bright and early, they said yes. You know which church is packed out now? It's the 9 o'clock one. Because that estate is a state of young couples with young children, and all the young children are up on a Sunday morning climbing all over you, and you're going out for lunch with Gran and Grandad. And if you can go to a 9 o'clock service, that fits in very nicely. And so amazingly, that's been the church that's grown. But how about changing the seats in your church? That's number 80 as well. I talked to a man whose job it is to design chairs for aircraft and cars. And he's come to an interesting conclusion, that all the chairs and benches and pews and forms that were made for churches about 80 to 100 years ago, 80 to 100 years ago were ideal in their concept and in their angles for the men. They weren't all that comfortable for the women. But now, because shapes of people have changed over the 100 years, those benches and pews are ideal for modern women, but uncomfortable for the men. So when the men attend your church and get uncomfortable, is it really because the Christian message is getting too near, or is it because they've been sitting too long? Wimpy in London found that they had problems with people staying too long in one of their snack bars, one of their fast food bars. And if the place is packed out, no one else comes in, of course. So they called in the expert who changed the angle of the seating by 5-6 degrees. And you sit on the Wimpy seat now, and after a little while, about 18.5 minutes, which is what it takes you to drink your Coke and eat your hamburger, after about 18.5 minutes you think, oh, I better be going. You don't know why you feel you better be going, but you go. And the throughput has doubled and the profits have gone up. You smile at that. I tell you, we ought to look far more seriously than we do at whether, in fact, we're putting men off because of our premises. Why not have a room at the church number 83 for the men? Churches I've found have got creche rooms and youth rooms. Why shouldn't there be a men room, a man room? Maybe more men had come. How about a sponsored parachute jump for local charity? That'll sort out the men from the boys. That's number 84. Or how about serving refreshments during the services? Not at the end, the coffee at the end. In fact, I know one of the most successful works on a council estate where the program, the morning service, is run as 3 half hours, on the basis that these men are not used to going for longer than half an hour. That's why the television slot is half an hour. And they're not used to going for longer than half an hour without either a smoke or a drink. And so they have half an hour. The first half hour, everyone is in. The nearest I can describe it is the game show Come On Down, with the leaders at the front sort of calling people in and participation going on for that half hour. Then they stop and they have refreshments. They knew they were getting the non-Christian men in when the men started lighting their cigarettes up in that middle half hour. And then they have half an hour, which is their teaching. The children go off into different sections, and the minister of that particular church often uses large screen video. He says, I can get the best preachers in the world. And he does for his service, Sunday after Sunday. He doesn't, if it's a Billy Graham 50-minute sermon, he doesn't run it all. He chooses the best 18 minutes, and he runs that. And he tops and tails it and gets sort of some of the presentation from some of these top preachers. That was number 87. Let me move on to number 93. The piano smashing event. Where do all the old pianos go, ladies and gentlemen? At the end of their lives, when their little ivories are turning up, where do they go? They run down the hill to find the nearest church. Usually the nonconformists, but occasionally they go to the parish church, and they run down the hills until they find these places. You can go into these churches, you can find one of these elderly pianos in every room. You can lift its lid, and either it sounds clonk or ping or nothing at all, but every room there's one of these elderly pianos. Now here's the answer. Either you sell them because there's a good trade in old pianos and you use the money for some new chairs for the men to sit on, or if you can't do that, you have a piano smashing event. It's based on the Royal Tournaments set up where they dismantle a gun carriage at one end of the arena, remember? They pass it over a wire, don't they? And then they reassemble it at the other end of the arena and fire a shot. And the first team to fire the shot are the winners. Well, it's the same principle. You smash the piano up at this end of the field. You have perhaps a big piece of hardboard with a hole in it, so the pieces have to be small enough to pass through the hole. The only difference is you don't put the piano together at that end of the field. You say, if you do it just before bonfire night, you have the bonfire wood as well. You'd be amazed how many men will turn up. Get St. John's ambulance as well, just in case, so that you've got people on hand. But you'll be amazed how many fringe men will come to show that they are macho man, and they'll enjoy having a smashing time. Number 100, how about an exercise gym in the deacon's vestry? Well, what else are deacon's vestries for, I ask you? Isn't that what they're meant to be for? What are all the hotels moving into? They're moving into the gym unit. The exercise, the leisure centre is part of the hotel, is it not? If you went to Ideal Home Exhibition, the home of the future has the office at home and a room that is the gym. And I tell you, there are lots of men who are prepared, who want to have a go at the weights, who'd like to have a go pumping the weights. They're not going to join the club, join some club to do it, but they'd like to have one chance to do it. And you can give them the chance, either hiring the equipment or hiring the sports and social club and the expert sort of person to help you, and you can be the bridge to give them that first chance. We talked once about aerobics for men. A church had an aerobics group for ladies that was 100 strong. And I said, why don't you have something for the men? Well, they said the men can come. And 2 men did. Can you imagine being one of 2 men behind 100 women doing aerobics? They put on an event just for the men, and 16 men came. Not all of them churchmen, men who also wanted to get fit and be in trim like their wives. And the medical check for men by the local GP, you might need that after the exercise gym, but the idea behind that was offering to the 35 to 45 age range a checkup, a basic sort of heart check. It was just done free of charge to anyone who wanted to turn up. Christian GPs set it up, the church put some funds in to help it, and it had the most amazing effect. They picked up one man actually who needed medical treatment, and they were able to get him hospital treatment very quick indeed. That was the only medical success I know, but they talked about having a new heart, and that gave them a marvelous opportunity as Christian doctors, not only to say why they were doing it as a social care thing for the neighborhood, but also why they wanted men to know God and God's life. What I'm doing is arguing that we should take the opportunities that we have today to reach men, to give men evangelism top priority in our churches and fellowships, a priority of time, I'm suggesting to you that we should assume ignorance of the Christian message, not hostility. Men, by and large, are not hostile, but they are ignorant. We need to build the bridges of friendship, build bridges of opportunity. And we need to set some kind of measurable target, it seems to me. Why don't we have the courage as churches and fellowships to set some target? That's not putting God on the spot. If anything, it'll challenge our faith and our expectancy, and it'll sharpen up our prayers. Setting a measurable target today for your church or your fellowship. How about this as a simple target? 1 man a month. For your church or fellowship, 1 man a month. 1 for Christ, or restored to a vibrant faith. And that happening month after month. 1 man a month. 1 for Christ. Or maybe someone who had a faith and has drifted right away, really met with God and set on fire for God. You know, even with a group like our seminar here today, that'd be 150 more men in the kingdom of God by this time next year. Wouldn't that be tremendous? This is time for harvest in our land. I showed that picture of grain, and I'm in sheep country, so I know little about grain growing. But a man who was a farmer came to me and said, "Do you know, Derek, when the stalks have turned over like that, you get the combine in quick. When the harvest is hanging like that, it really is harvest time, and you need to be in there within hours to gather in that harvest." I really do believe, and the evidence that I'm getting all around the country, is that this is an opportune time. This is a harvest time for reaching men. If we are going to bring in the harvest, there is no question, of course, we have to obey what the Master said. We have to go. He does the work, but we do the going. And so we come full circle, really, right back to where we started. There were 2 sons, said Jesus. And one of the sons said, no, I don't think this will work. I'm not interested in working in the vineyard. But then he changed his mind. Then he caught the vision. Then he obeyed the command. And he went off and did the job. The other son was still there the next morning, still saying, "Oh yeah, I'll get that job done." But he never went. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to go in obedience to the Master. And as we go, the Lord promises to work with us. Have you ever noticed that? He promises to work when we move, not when we sit still. So I'm encouraging you, urging you, challenging you, pressing you to go with the good news and to target men in your prayers and to expect the Lord of the harvest to add to his church. Let's pray together. Father, we want to say thank you because someone came to us with the message of life. And we want to be obedient. You know all the problems, all the barriers. We've told you about them many times. But Lord, we ask that you would give us now a fresh enthusiasm, a fresh vision, a new courage to go in your name and to win men into your kingdom. We thank you for the opportunities of today. And we want to say, Father, that all the praise and all the glory will be given only to your name. We pray through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.